Isabella of Castile, born 1451, a transformative monarch who, alongside her husband Ferdinand II of Aragon, unified Spain under a single crown and set the stage for its emergence as a global superpower. Ascending to the throne in 1474, her reign was marked by decisive religious and political reform, including the establishment of the Spanish Inquisition in 1478 and the expulsion of the Jewish population in 1492. Her sponsorship of Christopher Columbus's 1492 voyage led to the opening of the New World and extended Spain's influence across the vast oceans. Her patronage of the arts and education further ignited the Spanish Renaissance, enhancing her legacy as a ruler who significantly shaped not only Spanish, but world history. And despite all of the controversies surrounding her policies, particularly her role in those widespread religious persecutions, she remains a pivotal figure in the narrative of nation-building and global exploration. Hello and welcome to the channel. Is it your first time here? If it is, it's good to meet you. If you're coming back, great to see you again. Off we go on another adventure together. As always, if you'd like to support the channel, you're already doing it. The best way to support me is just to enjoy the content at your own pace. But if you want to go above and beyond, the like and subscribe button are only one click away, and if you want to go further than that, take a look in the video description. Now, without further ado, let's get busy. Isabella of Castile was born on April 22nd, 1451, in Madrigal de las Altas Torres, to John II of Castile and his second wife, Isabella of Portugal. She was originally second in line to the throne after her older half-brother Henry IV of Castile. 2 years later, her brother Alfonso was born, moving her to third in line. Sons always get priority, you see. Now, upon the death of their father in 1454, Henry IV ascended the throne, and Isabella and her siblings came under his care, relocating to Arevalo. Despite the provisions in her father's will for financial support, Isabella and her family faced hardships, primarily due to King Henry's failure to fulfill these wishes, possibly to limit their influence. During these challenging times, Isabella was raised with a strong focus on piety and religious values, guided closely by her mother. As turmoil increased, when King Henry's wife, Joan of Portugal, was pregnant with Joanna, Isabella and Alfonso were summoned to the royal court in Segovia for their education. Here, Isabella's lifestyle improved significantly, away from all those troubles, and she received a well-rounded education, living in relative comfort, although she was kept well away from the political unrest outside the palace walls. Ignorance is bliss, as they say. The political scenario intensified when rumors questioned Joanna's paternity, suggesting that she was the child of Beltran de la Cueva, a royal favorite, rather than the legitimate child of King Henry. This led the nobility to challenge Henry's lineage, promoting Alfonso as the true heir, and even encouraging him to claim the throne for himself. The dispute culminated in the Second Battle of Olmedo in 1467, which ended without a clear victor, but with Alfonso being recognized as heir presumptive under the condition that he would marry Joanna. Alfonso's untimely death, however, in 1468, suspected to be from poisoning, placed Isabella as the focal point of the succession. Now, Isabella, now proposed as heir by the nobles, sought to stabilize the situation through negotiation rather than further conflict. She met with Henry IV at Toros de Guisando, where they agreed that Isabella would be his heir presumptive, a position that required her not to marry without Henry's consent, but also assured that she wouldn't be forced into marriage. This agreement quelled immediate hostilities and preserved the notion of lawful succession, which was crucial for Isabella's claim and future ambitions. Isabella's early betrothal and subsequent marriage plans were deeply entangled with the politics of Spain and its neighboring kingdoms. At just 6 years old, she was betrothed to Ferdinand of Aragon, intended as a political alliance between Castile and Aragon to solidify the king's friendships and showcase their mutual trust to the world. Of course, this arrangement was somewhat short-lived due to shifting political aspirations. The death, however, of Alfonso V of Aragon in 1458 significantly altered the power dynamic in the region. His territories, including the strategic islands of Sicily and Sardinia, were inherited by his brother, John II of Aragon, strengthening John's position and reducing his need for an alliance with Henry IV of Castile, Isabella's half-brother. As John II's power increased, Henry IV saw an opportunity to align with Charles of Viana, John's estranged elder son, who was in conflict with his father. Part of this alliance involved a proposed marriage between Charles and Isabella. However, when John II discovered the plan, he was furious, as he had hoped Isabella would marry his favored younger son, Ferdinand. In response, John threw Charles in prison on accusations of conspiracy, and Charles died in captivity in 1461. A few years later, another marriage proposal surfaced for Isabella, this time linking her to Afonso V of Portugal in 1465. This alliance was facilitated by the Queen and the Count of Ledesma, aiming to secure a Portuguese alliance. However, Isabella, demonstrating early signs of the independent and decisive nature that would characterize her reign, was skeptical of this match, and ultimately just refused to consent to it, prioritizing her own political instincts and future aspirations over immediate diplomatic gains, which was, of course, a rather novel idea for the time. Now, the politics of Castile was always tumultuous, but at this point in time it was especially so, marked by a civil war over King Henry's ineffective reign. He was not popular. Amidst the chaos, an arrangement was made for Isabella to marry one Pedro Giron Acuña Pacheco, master of the Order of Calatrava. It was mainly made to appease the nobles. Now Pedro was not only influential, but he was also the brother of the king's favorite, Juan Pacheco, and promised a significant dowry to the royal treasury. Despite Henry's agreement to the marriage, Isabella was vehemently opposed and openly prayed for its cancellation. And miraculously for her, Pedro, while he was en route to meet Isabella, suddenly died, and it's quite hard to get married after that. The proposal was effectively ended. Very good luck for Isabella, it seems. While the ongoing instability led Henry to recognize Isabella as his heir presumptive on September the 19th, 1468, under conditions respecting her autonomy in marital decisions. However, Henry's subsequent actions contradicted this promise. He entertained a potential alliance with Edward IV of England, considering a marriage between Isabella and Richard, Duke of Gloucester. But this plan was never pursued earnestly. Thus, Henry's political maneuvers persisted, as he once again proposed a marriage between Isabella and Afonso V of Portugal, aiming to secure a dual inheritance of Portugal and Castile for his daughter Joanna, and also Afonso's son, John II. Isabella was understandably annoyed, and she rejected the proposal, remaining firm in her secret commitment to marry Ferdinand of Aragon, her initial betrothed. He was also her cousin, but far be it for me to push my morality on others. Well, as Henry sought an alliance with France by proposing marriage between Isabella and Charles, the Duke of Berry, Isabella once again held steadfast, refusing the match. Secret negotiations between John II of Aragon and Isabella led to a covert agreement to marry his son Ferdinand. The secret pact came to fruition when Isabella, under the pretense of visiting her brother's tomb, eloped from Henry's court, and Ferdinand, disguised as a servant, crossed Castile to meet her. Kind of romantic, don't you think? Well, their marriage took place on October 19th, 1469, in the Palacio de los Viveros in Valladolid. Since they were second cousins, the marriage did require papal dispensation to be considered legal. They were already allegedly aided by Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia, who procured a falsified papal bull from the already deceased Pope Pius II, allowing the marriage within the prohibited degrees of consanguinity. Now, upon the death of King Henry IV of Castile, December 11, 1471, his successor Isabella swiftly moved to secure her position. By December 12th, she had taken refuge in the Alcazar of Segovia, a significant fortress, where she garnered the support of influential figures like Andres de Cabrera and the Council of Segovia. The very next day, amidst a backdrop of political uncertainty, Isabella was proclaimed Queen of Castile and Leon, setting the stage for her reign. However, Isabella's ascension was far from uncontested. Diego Pacheco, the Marquis of Villena, and other dissenters challenged her claim to the throne, advocating instead for Joanna la Bertranella, the daughter of King Henry IV. You see, they argued that Joanna, being Henry's offspring, was the legitimate heir. Complicating matters even further, the Archbishop of Toledo, a previously staunch supporter of Isabella, defected over to join the Marquis's case. Their strategy involved a political marriage between Joanna and King Afonso V of Portugal, followed by a military invasion to seize the Castilian crown for Joanna. By May 1475, this plan was set into motion as King Afonso V led his forces into Spain, marrying Joanna in Plasencia and solidifying their alliance against Isabella. This union marked the beginning of a protracted and brutal conflict, known as the War of the Castilian Succession. The war's pivotal moment came at the Battle of Toro on March 1st, 1476. The battle was fiercely contested and concluded with ambiguous results. In fact, both sides had been beaten up pretty badly, but they both still claimed victory. King Alfonso V's troops faced defeat at the hands of the Castilian forces, commanded by the Duke of Alba and Cardinal Mendoza. Meanwhile, the Portuguese contingent, led by John of Portugal, managed to defeat the Castilian right wing and maintain control over the battlefield. This mixed outcome did not decisively end the conflict, but highlighted the deep divisions and ongoing struggle for control over Castile. The War for Succession would continue to shape Isabella's reign, testing her resolve and leadership in the formative years of her rule. The Battle of Toro, although tactically indecisive, emerged as a significant political victory for Isabella and Ferdinand, solidifying their rule over Castile. The battle's outcome led to the disbandment of Joana le Bertranella's supporters and forced the withdrawal of the Portuguese forces from Castilian territory. The strategic aftermath of this encounter, while the Portuguese king Afonso V reorganized his troops, Ferdinand cleverly broadcasted news of a supposed decisive victory across Castile and beyond, leading to the dissolution of opposition forces and portraying the battle as a crushing defeat for the Portuguese. Capitalizing on this victory, Isabella convened the Cortes at Madrigal, Segovia, between April and October 1476, where her daughter, also named Isabella, was sworn in as the heiress to the Castilian crown. This act not only reinforced the legitimacy of her own reign, but also strengthened the dynastic succession. Isabella's resolve as a leader was further tested in August 1476, when a rebellion broke out in Segovia. Demonstrating her skill and independence as a ruler, Isabella personally rode into the city herself to quell the uprising, and Ferdinand was nowhere to be seen. He was out engaged in his own military campaigns. Ignoring the counsel of her male advisors, she entered the city completely alone to negotiate with the rebels. And she was successful. She suppressed the revolt, swiftly and decisively. In 1478, the birth of her son, John, Prince of Asturias, further solidified her position. The arrival of a male heir was widely viewed as additional legitimization of her reign, enhancing her standing among her contemporaries. During this period, the struggle for power extended beyond the borders of Castile into the Atlantic Ocean, where the Castilian and Portuguese navies vied for control over the lucrative trade routes to Guinea, which were rich in gold and slaves. The Battle of Guinea, a naval battle, marked another crucial conflict during Isabella's reign, as it was pivotal in determining control over these valuable maritime resources. The conclusion of the prolonged conflict between Castile and Portugal was marked by the Treaty of Alsacovas, signed on the 4th of September 1479. This treaty was pivotal, as it decisively ended the War of the Castilian Succession, with substantial outcomes influencing the balance of power in the Atlantic territories. While Portugal acknowledged Isabella as the legitimate Queen of Castile, it secured an expansive share of Atlantic territories. These included Guinea, with its lucrative gold mines, as well as the Cape Verde and Madeira Islands, the Azores, and exclusive rights to conquer the kingdom of Fez. In stark contrast, Castile retained the Canary Islands, but had to forego any further Atlantic expansion south of these islands. The treaty also mandated Castile to pay Portugal a substantial war indemnity, totaling over 100,000 obols of gold. Moreover, it included provisions for the political asylum of Joana le Bertranella in Portugal, rather than Spain. It also required Isabel and Ferdinand to pardon all supporters of Joanna and King Afonso V of Portugal. Crucially, the Catholic monarchs, who had even proclaimed themselves rulers of Portugal during the conflict, were compelled to relinquish any claims to the Portuguese crown. Well, of course, this treaty heavily favored Portugal, granting it almost a monopoly over the lucrative Atlantic trade routes and significant territories, effectively limiting Castilian maritime expansion. This arrangement caused considerable discontent in Castile, particularly in Andalusia, which was aggrieved by the loss of access to the gold of Guinea. Thus things shifted significantly with Christopher Columbus's voyages, which began in 1492. Columbus's discovery of the New World, under the auspices of the Spanish crown, offered a new avenue for expansion, circumventing the limitations imposed by the Treaty of Alsacovas. The monarchs had instructed Columbus to adhere strictly to the territorial boundaries established by the treaties, specifically directing him to explore along the parallel of the Canary Islands. The strategic exploration led to the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494, which renegotiated the terms of Atlantic exploration and colonization, establishing a more favorable balance for Castile. This new agreement redefined the zones of Spanish and Portuguese influence, granting Spain access to newfound territories in the Americas, while maintaining Portugal's rights to its African and Asian ventures. The shift not only alleviated the constraints placed on Castile by the Treaty of Alsacovas, but also heralded a new era of Spanish expansion and influence in the New World. Thus, when Isabella ascended to the throne in 1474, Castile was in dire straits, marked by rampant crime and minimal law enforcement during the reign of her brother Henry IV. This period was characterized by widespread violence, with crimes such as murder and robbery, and even worse crimes committed against women, occurring frequently and largely unpunished. The necessity to reform and stabilize her kingdom was certainly evident, and Isabella approached this challenge with a very strong hand, often perceived as favoring justice and rigor over mercy, even more so than her husband Ferdinand. One of her first major reforms was the establishment of La Santa Hermandad, or the Holy Brotherhood, during the Cortes held in Madrigal in 1476. While similar organizations had existed before, 1476 marked the first instance where the Hermandad was utilized by the Crown as a formal police force. Historically, Hermandades were grassroots groups of armed men who banded together to enforce public order, kind of like a neighborhood watch. Often, they were disbanded by monarchs, who viewed them as a challenge to royal authority, and of course you could certainly see why. However, By leveraging the Hermandad, Isabella aimed to counteract the power of unruly nobles, who had, until then, dominated local law enforcement to the detriment of centralized royal control. The newly established General Hermandad for Castile, Leon, and Asturias was comprised of local members responsible for patrolling roads and rural areas to suppress crime. This force was funded through a specific tax, imposing 1,800 maravedis on every 100 households, reflecting Isabella's strategic use of community-based policing funded by the public. In 1477, Isabella personally extended the implementation of this reformed Hermandad to regions like Extremadura and Andalusia, showing once again her commitment to ensuring effective law enforcement throughout her realm. Continuing her crackdown on lawlessness, in 1481 she appointed 2 officials with the admittedly daunting task of restoring peace in Galicia, a province long tormented by tyrant nobles and rampant brigandage. These regions were notorious for highwaymen and local oppressors, who made travel and commerce almost impossible. The officials, armed with royal authority, managed to expel over 1,500 criminals from Galicia, and of course, that dramatically improved safety and stability. Now these reforms exemplify Isabella's methodical and hands-on approach to governance. By re-establishing royal authority and centralizing control, she significantly enhanced the administration of justice throughout Castile. These measures not only curbed the immediate chaos, but also laid the groundwork for the enduring stability and consolidation of her rule. Isabella's legacy in criminal justice reform demonstrates her pivotal role in transforming Castile into a more orderly and well-governed state, pivotal in her broader agenda of strengthening the monarchy and consolidating her territories under rule of law. Of course, when she came to the throne, she was immediately confronted with a treasury drained by mismanagement of her predecessor Henry IV. You see, it was his reign that severely depleted the kingdom's finances through reckless fiscal policies and indiscriminate sale of royal lands. He'd thrown the country down the drain, effectively, and Isabella had to do something about it. Now, one of her initial measures to restore financial health to Castile involved addressing the widespread alienation of royal estates that occurred under Henry's rule. At the Cortes of Toledo in 1480, it was determined that a sustainable financial recovery could only be achieved through the reclamation of lands. While the proposal to revoke these lands was supported by key nobles, Isabella approached the issue with caution to avoid widespread discontent. You see, she understood that simply showing up and taking things away from people might make them a little bit upset. Well, an investigation led by the Archbishop of Toledo assessed the transactions of land during Henry's reign. The inquiry revealed that many estates and rents had been sold off cheaply and not as rewards for services. This decision was made to restore these lands to the crown without any compensation if they had been granted freely, and to repurchase them at their original undervalued prices if sold. This policy did not, however, extend to lands granted to churches, hospitals, or the poor, showcasing Isabella's desire to balance fiscal responsibility with a little pinch of social compassion. Once again, novel ideas for the time. Of course, another pressing issue was the debasement of Castile's currency, exacerbated by the proliferation of minting operations during Henry's reign, which had expanded from 5 to an astonishing, wait for it, 150 active mints. Because we all know that when you run out of money, just print more of it. Of course, it also led to a flood of poor quality coinage, undermining both economic stability and public trust in the currency. Isabella quickly implemented a royal monopoly over the minting of coins and established rigorous standards for the coinage to ensure its reliability and value. By drastically reducing the number of mints and centralizing control, she not only enhanced the integrity of Castile's monetary system, but also restored faith in the crown's capacity to manage the kingdom's finances effectively. Thus, her approach to governance and Ferdinand's approach in their respective kingdoms, particularly in Castile, was characterized by more reforming and optimizing existing structures than by creating new administrative institutions, fixing the old problems before coming up with anything new. What a novel idea. While they focused on making the established systems work more effectively, leveraging the royal household and its associated court, which had been central to Castilian government. While the royal household traditionally functioned with two main components, one was comprised of household officials, primarily from the nobility, who performed governmental and political duties in exchange for special payments. The other component consisted of about 200 permanent servants, known as continos, who handled a range of confidential tasks for the monarchs. By the late 1470s, many senior positions within the household had become largely honorary and were held by nobles, while the actual administrative work was carried out by individuals of lower social ranks, often senior churchmen, who were less concerned with title and more with function. The main advisory body to the rulers, the Royal Council, held comprehensive powers over the legal and political disputes, and had supervised senior administrative officials across Castile. It served as the supreme judicial tribunal of the kingdom. Historically, the council included two overlapping groups of councillors, one with judicial and administrative duties, including bishops, nobles, and increasingly professional administrators known as letrados, and the other comprised individuals who held less formal but more influence-based roles. Now in 1480, during the Cortes of Toledo, Isabella implemented significant reforms to streamline the royal council. She clarified the roles within the council, focusing on enhancing the efficiency and reducing the overlap between the councillors' responsibilities. She eliminated the less formal category of councillor, restricting their participation to observational roles within council meetings. This move effectively reduced the potential for decisions being swayed by personal influence or political pressure, ensuring a more merit-based and less corruptible governance structure. Isabella's governance strategy significantly reshaped the administrative landscape of Castile, emphasizing professionalism and centralized control while also maintaining a personal connection with her subjects. Her reliance on professional administrators, mainly from the bourgeois and lesser nobility, marked a pivotal shift from traditional noble-dominated councils. By restructuring the royal council to include a specific composition of 1 bishop, 3 knights, and 8 or 9 lawyers, she ensured that the council's decisions were grounded in legal and ethical considerations, rather than in lineage and privilege. This reorganization minimized the direct involvement of the nobility in daily governmental affairs, but did allow them to attend council meetings, providing a pathway for more dedicated nobles to contribute, while potentially sidelining the less committed. This setup aimed to streamline decision-making processes and reduce the influence of personal interests in state matters. The establishment of set times for the monarchs to hear the subjects' grievances directly was an innovative approach that not only endeared Isabella to her people, but also instilled a sense of direct justice that had been very much absent in Castilian governance before. This practice, where Isabella and Ferdinand personally attended to the complaints, symbolized a monarchy that was actually in touch with the populace's needs and concerns. Furthermore, Isabella expanded the scope of governance through the creation of specialized councils, such as the Council of State, which dealt with foreign affairs, and the Supreme Court of the Santa Hermandad, alongside the Council of Finance and other councils handling Aragonese-specific issues. This specialization allowed for a more focused and effective governance in each domain. Despite these advancements in administrative efficiency and public engagement, Isabella's reforms diluted the power of the Cortes, the traditional parliamentary body of Castile. The Cortes transitioned from a significant legislative body to a more ceremonial role, often ratifying decisions pre-formulated by Isabella's administration. The shift towards a non-parliamentary government highlighted a centralization of power that characterized Isabella's reign, setting a precedent for future Spanish monarchs. Now, in terms of legal reform, the commissioning of Alfonso Diaz de Montalvo to rationalize and codify Castilian law was an admittedly monumental task that led to the creation of the Ordenanzas Reales. This comprehensive code, completed in 8 volumes within 4 years, streamlined the legal framework of Castile, making law a lot more accessible and, of course, a lot more easily enforceable, and laid a foundational stone for the modernization of the Spanish legal system. The conquest of Granada marked the culmination of the Reconquista, a centuries-long effort to reclaim Spanish territories controlled by Muslim rulers. Isabella and Ferdinand's campaign against the Nasrid dynasty in Granada was strategic and determined, demonstrating their commitment to consolidating their rule over a unified Spain. The campaign, which began in earnest in 1482, faced numerous challenges, including the formidable natural defenses of the region and the initial disunity among Granada's leadership. Of course, if you want a more detailed explanation of the Reconquista, I've already done a full video on that, and you'll probably find it in the medieval playlist. Should be in there. Well, the capture of key cities such as Ronda, Loya, and Malaga, facilitated by significant advancements in military technology, particularly in artillery, certainly helps when you can blow people up, showcased the tactical acumen of the Catholic monarchs. The fall of Malaga and the subsequent capitulation of Baza stripped Granada of the critical defences and paved the way for the eventual siege and surrender of the city of Granada itself in 1491. The victory was not just a military triumph, but also a significant political achievement, reinforcing the Catholic monarch's authority and symbolizing the unification of Spain under Christian rule. The Treaty of Granada, signed in 1492, was crucial in ensuring a relatively peaceful transition of power. It promised religious freedoms to Muslim and Jewish residents, showcasing a strategic tolerance designed to maintain stability in the newly conquered territories. Recognizing the importance of capable military leaders, Isabella appointed Gonzalo Fernández de Córdoba, known as the Great Captain, to a prominent role during the negotiations and later military campaigns. His innovations in military tactics and organization during subsequent conflicts would have lasting impacts on European warfare. Isabella's sponsorship of Christopher Columbus in 1492, just months after the conquest of Granada, opened a new chapter in world history. In fact, you're probably listening from America right now, at least if you are part of the 51% of North American viewers that I have. Well, although initially hesitant, the successful outcome of the Columbus voyage, marked by his arrival in the New World and the subsequent Treaty of Tordesillas with Portugal, established Spain as a major global maritime power. The agreement, brokered in 1494, divided the non-European world between Spain and Portugal, paving the way for extensive Spanish exploration and colonization that would usher in the Spanish Empire, for better or worse, depending on who you ask. Now, Queen Isabella's policies towards the indigenous peoples of the America were notably advanced for their time, reflecting a surprisingly humanitarian approach that was rare in the context of European colonial expansion. Despite the norms of the period, which often involved the ruthless exploitation and enslavement of native populations, Isabella established clear directives to treat the native peoples under Spanish rule as subjects of the Crown of Castile, entitled to certain protections against enslavement and mistreatment. Now, this of course leads us to our next thing, which is Isabella's disapproval of Christopher Columbus's treatment of the natives, which became evident after he captured a large number of them. He wasn't meant to do that. Responding to this, she not only ordered the return of the 1,200 men, but also Columbus's arrest, signaling her serious commitment to ethical governance in the newly discovered lands. This incident underlined her realization that the responsibilities of conquest and evangelization should not be concentrated in the hands of one individual, prompting her to authorize other explorers to undertake missions to the New World, thereby diversifying leadership and oversight in these territories. In her last will, Isabella's concern for the welfare of the indigenous populations was further emphasized. She instructed her successors to ensure that the natives were treated with justice and fairness, highlighting her forward-thinking approach to human rights and her desire to integrate these principles into the nascent Spanish colonial system. Now, of course, at this point, you're probably thinking that, well, Isabella, she could certainly do no wrong. All these decisions she's making are very much based in kindness, and what a lovely woman. Well, I'm just about to tell you about the Alhambra Decree. Now, Isabella's reign also saw the enforcement of this decree, which led to the expulsion of all Jews from Spain. Influenced by the Dominican friar Thomas de Torquemada, the first Inquisitor General. We'll get to that in a minute. And despite her initial reluctance based on economic considerations, Isabella and Ferdinand eventually ordered the expulsion of Jews who refused to convert to Christianity. In fact, it has been suggested that the number of Jews who left Spain was far less than traditionally estimated, with a significant number simply choosing to convert over exile. This decree, alongside her establishment of the Spanish Inquisition, yes, that was her, marked a dark chapter in her reign, which, if you didn't know about it before you watched the video, you'll probably think it's a bit of a surprise, especially hearing about all of the other things. It's a stark contrast with her more progressive policies in the Americas, and her attitudes towards fixing the country up, the strong rule of law. Well, I suppose everybody has two sides. Her strategic matrimonial alliances significantly shaped European politics and exemplify her far-reaching influence as a monarch. Oh, and just before we do keep reading, if you want to know more about the Inquisition, I've done a full video on that as well. 2, I believe. You may want to go and watch them. Well, her title, Catholic Monarch, granted by Pope Alexander VI, highlights her commitment to consolidating religious unity across Spain. Although she did reportedly disapprove of the Pope's conduct. And, well, a lot of the time, let's just say their founding of the Spanish Inquisition was a way of getting away from direct papal control. The politics are a little bit complicated, but, like I said, go watch my videos on the Spanish Inquisitions. Now, Isabella's reign marked a period of profound religious and political transformation, notably, of course, through the institutionalization of the Inquisition and the forced conversion or expulsion of Spain's Jewish populations, but also the Muslim populations. Now, you must remember, this is immediately after the Reconquista. Of course, not everyone was a soldier who got killed, or a soldier who fled, or a king who was ousted from the throne. No, a lot of them were just normal Muslims living their lives. They just happened to be living them in a place where some people didn't think they ought to be. Well, you either fit in or you get out. That was the attitude of the time. Well, these efforts were pretty much part of a broader agenda to establish a homogeneous Christian realm. But you see, there are reasons why. Earlier in different sieges, especially during the Crusades, it was often that a sympathetic Christian would open the gates for a Christian army to come in, or a sympathetic Muslim would open the gates for a Muslim army to come in. There was also that incident at the siege of Toledo. Well, all for different videos. I really should stay on track. I do apologize, everyone. Well, the revocation of the Treaty of Granada in 1502, following Muslim uprisings, underscores the complexity of Isabella's policies towards religious minorities. Her confessor, Cisneros, played a crucial role as Archbishop of Toledo, furthering the religious consolidation by reforming Spanish ecclesiastical institutions, paving the way for the Counter-Reformation. Thus, Isabella's legacy is also evident in her children's marriages, which linked the Spanish crown with other major European houses. Her son, John married Margaret of Austria, tying Spain to the Habsburgs, while her daughters, Isabella and Joanna, married into the Portuguese and Habsburg royal families respectively. Tragically, the early deaths of her son and other daughter Isabella, along with her grandson Miguel, thwarted her plans for a stable succession. Well, despite her personal losses, she managed to secure the Spanish throne for her daughter Joanna and her Habsburg son-in-law Philip I. Furthermore, her youngest daughter, Catherine of Aragon, became a pivotal figure in English history through her marriages to Arthur, Prince of Wales, and subsequently to King Henry VIII. While these unions were part of Isabella's broader strategy to forge and strengthen political alliances through marital ties, influencing the political and religious landscape of Renaissance Europe. Isabella withdrew from active governance on the 14th of September 1504 and passed away later that year on the 26th of November at the Medina del Campo Royal Palace. Her health and spirit were profoundly affected by the deaths of her close family members, her son Prince John of Asturias in 1497, her mother Isabella of Portugal in 1496, and her daughter Princess Isabella of Asturias in 1498. She is buried in the Capella Real in Granada, a mausoleum constructed by her grandson Charles V. Although Isabella requested that her daughter Isabella's body be moved to Granada to rest beside her, this wish was never fulfilled. Today, the museum adjacent to the Capella Real houses Isabella's crown and scepter, enduring symbols of her powerful reign, and, if you want, you can take a journey there and see them for yourself. If you do, take a picture and send it to me. I'm yet to go there. It's all on the list. Well, speaking of the list, I have a list of my top supporters that I would like to thank. That is Britt, Charles, Stark Factory, JC, Jeffrey, Wendy, Tim, James, and Eric. Thank you very much, dearest of the dear friends. And I'd like to thank you too. You get the bonus thanks for listening all this way. Well, perhaps you're fast asleep. If you are, I hope you're already having a very good dream, one with swords and dragons or something. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. I wish you all the best. Have a good rest, and when you wake up, make sure you have a big smile along with a glass of water. Get plenty of exercise. Good night and farewell.